Hello, everybody. We are back with episode 16 of Full Circle. It has been an interesting week. So many good matchups across 3WC and Corsay's closed. So, for this episode, we're going to start off talking about 3WC Grand Finals. So many good matches across the weekend. We'll spend some time talking about 3WC MVP and some notable players we thought played really well throughout the whole tournament. Next, we'll move on to talking about Corsay's semifinals matches and do some predictions for finals. And of course, finish it off for the thing everybody is here for, the interview with Enri. Should be good. So, I'm iFlame, joined by the one and only Sad Shiba, Ty Kenny, and Knots. How are y'all doing today?
I'm doing great. Bro, yesterday I spent £74 on all the Prime drinks and they were all mid. Don't buy them.
Why?
Well,
They're way too expensive. Dude, listen. They're not too bad. I'm trying the lemon and lime one right now.
Well-
But they were outrageously expensive. Outrageously.
That's like the Logan Paul brand or something, right?
Yeah,
It
the
is,
Logan
yeah.
Logan Paul KSI drink. I had to try it though because I
Good
saw it in the
lord.
store. I was out in the city with my friends and I had to try all the flavors. We all made like a tier list and there wasn't a single one that we thought was S tier. And that's how you
Well,
know they're all kind of mid. So
there you
let's
go.
Damn.
don't spend
Um,
£74 on Prime.
Yep, heard it here first. We have just lost our Prime sponsorship, so thank you, Shiba. But let's get
Thank you,
right
soldier.
into.
Thank you.
Let's
Yeah, I'm
get
okay
right-
with that.
We'll get right into 3WC. I mean, this was such a good matchup. I think a lot of people expected it to be very close, but it was really a treat that we got to see it go to tiebreaker, and it was two very good teams. Hong Kong versus United States. Hong Kong ended up taking that one 7-6. Taikani, talk to us about this match.
Okay, so my first thought about this match is I feel really, really, really bad because I mapped the tiebreaker. The tiebreaker was a pre-existing map that I made for another tournament, and I was planning on making changes to it that I didn't make before 3WC. Taquito would end up breaking on the pattern that I planned on changing, something that changed the entire outcome of the match. I feel so messed up over it. You have no idea. My heart was broken because I knew I could have altered the course of his. Great match, though.
the national sabotage.
It was. I feel like a traitor to my country. But I mean, it was a great match. You saw a lot of sort of back and forth. Wherever there was a break point, it was immediately traded back. It was kept close. It never felt like it was ever one-sided. And even on the tiebreaker, it came down to, if I remember correctly, a 20K difference. So it was very, very exciting match to watch. And I'm super happy to see Hong Kong kind of move on to that grand finals and for the USA to see that they made it to grand finals and fought their best.
I mean, yeah, this match, as you said, it was really close. I think I was predicting. I think I predicted USA to win, but definitely Hong Kong just kind of performed, man. And of course, their core two players really stepped up. But on top of that, their flexible players rivaled the US a lot more than I imagined. They definitely did way better with keeping up with the USA flexibility. Having Shiraha Yuki fill in for most of the maps was really good. F2X filled in for a lot of the speedy mechanics maps that USA normally would abuse. We also got to see the Prince Romaro SC on the normal 2, which is nice because we don't get to see him very often this tournament. So, yeah, I think the full players for Hong Kong really surprised me, and it was great. It was a really, really good match. I think the super, super close map that, aside from TB, of course, was that Hard Rock 3. That one was ridiculously contested. Lots of really close scores. Of course, you had Fiery, Dingleton, and Boshi on the US roster, but Hong Kong slipped it out by about 30K. Aside from that tiebreaker, that was probably the closest map in the match, and that was definitely one of the most exciting points because that would have led to kind of a late game advantage. But Hong Kong won it, and that low edge helped them out to secure TB and winning the match.
Yeah,
I'd agree that HK had some key performances from Shira Yuki F2X on the TB. I think though that it's yet another match where I think the US as a whole looks better in terms of match costs than HK, and I don't know, incredible performance from Taquito as well. somehow, in spite of everything, my prediction was for the US to win. I still feel like they should have won on some level. It doesn't. It almost feels strange to me that it turned out this way. I mean, obviously HK deserved to win, but it's something went wrong. Something went terribly wrong for the US to lose, I feel like. And you know, I mean, Taikani probably has an opinion on that, but it's you know, it's just it is all the more heartbreaking, the 20K, but it is what it is, right? That's
It really
Yeah.
is. I feel like Hong Kong is such a hard team to ban against too. Between Suwagi and MCY, they just have so many different skill sets that they're good at. And then you guys have already mentioned Saraha Yuki and F2X just being such strong fill players. I think they really showed up in this match, especially. And without them doing such a good job at filling those third slots, Hong Kong doesn't even come close to winning this match. And otherwise, the picks were pretty standard. There were some ups and downs for Hong Kong. Certainly, they really choked the DT2, getting I think their worst score of the weekend by about 500,000 points, and that starts to look a little scary. And then they bring it right back 2 maps later with a 3 million team score on DT1, and I'm sure they were feeling so good about themselves after that one. And ultimately, as well as Taquito played, and despite what the match costs say, I think both teams had really smart picks throughout. Aside from the start of the match, neither of them really gave up many breakpoints. It didn't feel like there was any major chokes from either team. Obviously, that miss from Taquito on the tiebreaker is heartbreaking. But just how it goes sometimes. And I do also think that, I mean, I think I said this last weekend too, but I do feel like Hong Kong is just the better matchup into South Korea. I feel like if US had won this match, um, I don't think we would even see the bracket reset potentially. Just feel like Hong Kong was the better matchup. So I was honestly pretty happy to see them win. But yeah, I mean, obviously, huge shout out to MCY and Suwagi who have been popping off for Hong Kong all tournament.
Yeah, they did. They did way better in the far later stages than I expected, considering that they had a few notable performances in previous matches where they struggled a little bit more. We saw a few unfortunate chokes from Hong Kong in the earlier mid stages of the tournament. But yeah, no, I'm pleasantly surprised. I mean, M4 and Suwagi really popped off in this grand finals pool, and that's a good thing to see. They made a really good match against USA, and then we're going to be talking about the next match
We
coming up.
are we are in a second, but before that, I did actually want to quickly mention it's really interesting when you look at a tournament like Corsai's Close that Suwagi and MCY4 are both playing in, and so far Suwagi has been having a much better time. But then when you look at a tournament like 3WC, it has actually been MCY that has really been showing up and consistently performing a little bit better than Suwagi every round. So it just goes to show that kind of difference between kind of these high skill cap maps in solo tournaments, and the kind of lower SR maps in a team tournament where you have people to fill for you when needed. And so it seems like both of these players kind of shine in their respective environments. Now, on to the South Korea Hong Kong match. Did go to bracket reset, but we'll start off with the first match 7-4 in favor of Hong Kong, bringing it to bracket reset. Knots. I mean, this is a great match.
Yeah,
Go
it's
for it.
stupidly close match with 5 maps had a score difference below 100K. On top of some of the maps above that, still being highly contested and eminently winnable for the losing side. I mean, you could easily see a different timeline where the other team wins some of these maps. But I mean, it's just the small differences. Like literally, like the last map is the thing that comes to mind, where Amiya Kokoro shakes and misses at the very end of the free mod and gives it over to Hong Kong, whereas could have kept going. I think again, it's a match where I make note of Shiraha F2X on certain maps, like Shiraha Yuki on Hidden 2, F2X on Nature 1. I think it's just really important, actually. As much as, Tsuwagi MCY4 have to be there, it's just these backup scores make make the difference a lot of the time, especially with these really, really tight score differences where it could have gone either way. It's actually a big deal, and maybe a little bit, maybe not rating them as much as I should have earlier on in the tournament. Partially due to their performances, but still, it's they deserve some, their due credit for contributing to the run.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah,
Kind of said everything I was thinking.
there you go. I mean, I thought the bans were a little bit easier for South Korea, just in the sense that I felt like they had a little bit more flexibility in the maps that they could ban. It didn't feel like there was any map that they were going to get completely blown out on. But Hong Kong didn't really have many choices. I think it was clear they weren't comfortable on the hidden three that they banned out both times that you would expect South Korea to be very good on. And then this is why it's so important, or it's so helpful to be in the upper bracket and have information from that previous match, because Hong Kong got completely exposed by the US on No Mod 5. They didn't look good on it at all, and South Korea wins that 100% of the time. And so their hand was really forced. They were with the bans. And I do think the kind of early maps were fairly even. Both teams played well. There were some good team scores, some bad team scores. Nothing super crazy. But I think as South Korea did start to fall apart maybe a little bit on the DT2 pick. I mean, Hong Kong against the USA gets 1.1 million on it, and it was just a big underperformance from Hong Kong, and I think they got completely baited into picking it. So they picked the DT2 as their second pick, get absolutely blown out of the water with Hong Kong beating their score by like 500,000. Then they get obliterated on No Mod 2 by like 700,000. And they did do a good job recovering and getting some maps back. But after that, it was just kind of too late for South Korea. Now, I mean, I also hesitate to ever say a team got lucky. Obviously, Hong Kong played well and deserved to win. But you look at all the close maps throughout that match, and Hong Kong won every single one of them. There was, I think, 3 different maps that South Korea lost by less than 50K points. And that's the difference between, a 7-4 win and potentially going to tiebreaker. Obviously, worst HR player popped off as usual, and Suwagi and MCY did great. And yeah, they just needed to do the same thing in bracket reset, but we're unable to. Did you guys have anything else to add before we moved on?
No, I'm good with it.
Yeah, bracket reset, unfortunately, was the opposite result. 7-3 to South Korea. They were able to take that one. Shiba, I'll let you start us off.
Okay, so the thing with bracket resets is that it can go one of two ways. The winners bracket team treats the first match as a research match and kind of exploits what they know and use their consistency and their kind of stability long term to win. Or it can be the other way around, where the team who won the original match kind of swings and shreds in momentum. And I think this is where we see the outlying flaw in Hong Kong, where you are relying too much on these two core players, and MCY4 and Suwagi. They're both really good. They're both incredible in the tournament scene. We've established this so many times. But when you have to play a whole other grand final tournament once again on a really tough pool against a really tough team, where you have to keep up against players like worst HR player and Amamiya Kokoro all the time, it can get straining. And this is where we see a few cracks from the Hong Kong roster, where we see a few maps that we would expect on paper Hong Kong to win on, where South Korea kind of edged it out. And South Korea once again proved that their flexibility helped them. They have a lot less strain on them, they have a lot less pressure on them. This game can get really, really tiring, especially in a grand final scenario with a pool that averages at about 7.5 stars. That's when you start to notice the cracks in that core 2-man roster. And South Korea exploited it really well. Not only did they have the more flexible roster, but they had the information and they played around it. They didn't change the bans except for the normal 2 instead. Actually, no, yeah, they did change. They did change one ban. They swapped the hidden 1 with the normal 2. They learned that normal 2 from last map was just not something they want to deal with. So they just decided to get rid of that altogether, and that's the power of bracket resets. Your grand finals team, if you're consistent, if you have the stamina to keep going, you can really exploit these matches, and that's kind of how South Korea edged it out a lot more. But Hong Kong put up a damn good fight on that first match, like a damn good fight.
They really did, and I mean, I like your point. This was the key for me in that second match was the adaptation for South Korea. I think they had a really smart change of bans, but in the picks as well. You know, they picked multiple maps that Hong Kong had previously won, and this time around they were able to win them. They were confident going into their picks, and I think far too often you see a team lose grand final, like the first match of a grand final series, and they just kind of get stuck into that pattern of, you know, we can't afford to ban out something else, have to keep these bans. But it kind of goes back to the flexibility that South Korea has with their bans. And so being able to leave the HD1 open to ban out the No Mod 2 that they had no chance of winning was absolutely massive for them, whereas Hong Kong really had no choice but to keep with the same bans. I was also a little bit surprised by the No Mod 1 first pick by Hong Kong. It seemed very risky because South Korea has been so good on No Mod 1s all tournament. Even if they don't have, you know, no one on their roster is particularly known for No Mod 1s, but they have looked good on it. And they very nearly lost the point just getting that off the back of a 700k pop off from MCY. Now, this match was kind of the opposite, where a lot of the closer points this time went South Korea's way. And so this time around, it was just them getting the slightly better combos every time, getting the slightly better scores, and just edging out those maps. And I mean, you get far into the map, right? It was actually pretty close most of the way through, right? I think it was something like 5-3, still anyone's game. And then Hong Kong is kind of running out of picks. So logically, they pick the HD1, which South Korea previously banned out. Makes a ton of sense. I don't know why you would pick anything else at that point. And they end up losing the hidden 1. And after that, I feel like they were just completely out of picks, and it was pretty doomed from that point onward. And I think, honestly, if they had won the HD1, they very well could have had the momentum to bring it back and make it a very close second round. But it's just so deflating to have that kind of pick in your back pocket that you expect to win, and it just doesn't go your way. But overall, you know, one kind of theme tends to be how tired are the players in these next matches. It is obviously exhausting to play a tournament match for that long, especially back to back. But when you look at the scores of both of these teams, for the most part, they actually both improved their scores from the previous match. So it didn't feel like anyone was particularly affected by being, you know, super tired or anything like that. And just a really great performance by South Korea. Now, last thing I'll add is that obviously worst HR player has been the star for South Korea all tournament and stepped up in this match too. But Amamiya Kokoro was absolutely massive for South Korea this time around. Had some really big scores when it mattered, consistently put up very comparable scores and occasionally better scores than worst HR player. And it was honestly just a huge step up from Kokoro to get them that win.
I'll come in quickly before I get into the main event of what I'm going to talk about. Just with a comment on the No Mod 1, because I was confused about that pick as well initially, but having thought about it a little bit more, I think the Grand Finals No Mod 1 was a pretty big step up from the prior No Mod 1 in difficulty. It's basically cross-screen jumps the whole time, which the Finals No Mod 1 is quite a bit more reasonable in that sense. So I think that actually does favor HK quite a bit, and they probably even should have picked it in the first set, because Suwagi MCY4 versus, it becomes 2 hyper carries versus 1, essentially, just because the skill cap is so high. So I think that did favor Hong Kong, and it is kind of a pick that makes sense. But the main thing I want to talk about is that it's kind of getting on to that hidden 1 thing, because that's, I think it arguably went wrong before that. it's a deserved win for SK, but I think the Allegrissimo double tap into hidden one, just 2 maps later, left a little bit of a bad taste in my mouth. It's like it's a very anticlimactic and sad way for Hong Kong to go out to me. I'm not blaming Allegrissimo for the former either. It's like I could do the whole bleeding about what terribly unsportsmanlike conduct it supposedly is to do what it takes to win, even though it's totally fair. It's just that these 2 maps made all the difference in the world, and what should have been a 5-4, 4-5 scoreline turns into 6-3. I think we were potentially robbed of a closer match because of, maybe some pooling problems, I would argue. Because the hidden one, a whole third of the map, the ending third of the map is slow section. It's like 4 stars. It's nothing for like a whole third of the map. And it's really tragic to just watch Hong Kong bleed out on that map where and also the first 2/3 being also arguably easy for the pool. It ends up being kind of a shit miss you lose map where I don't know. It's a bit upsetting that it turned out that way, even though ultimately, absolutely, SK deserves to win. It is what it is, don't miss, play better, skill issue, whatever. But
True.
I don't know. I wish things would have been a little bit different with that.
I mean, I feel like gotta blame the pooler. Can't fault the player. Can't be slandering all our double tappers out there. I think if a map gets pooled that is double tappable, fair game, honestly.
Does Takane have any thoughts? Do you have any thoughts on this match, Takane?
Not so much on the match, but yeah, the pool was kind of
It had
a
some
little bit
issues.
wonky at times. We saw in finals we had the easy map. In grand finals,
yeah.
we had that hidden one. We also had No Mod 4, something that USA, the No Mod 4 team, banned
Yeah.
out.
That's
The pool
weird.
kind of affected things a little bit. Obviously, those who deserve to win will still end up winning at the end of the day. It wasn't the worst pool ever, but it certainly did affect these sort of little things like Hong Kong losing on that hidden one and such.
Yeah,
I
also
feel-
DT won the burst before the final.
True.
Ki is like also just decided the map
Yeah.
every single time. It's yeah.
I feel like the common theme with this is that quite a few maps in the pool had some really absurd diff spikes after or before sections that would be deemed a lot lower level in other pools. And that for a grand finals pool where kind of consistency and mechanics consistency is really what matters. Diff spikes can really throw players off, and that can lead to some misses that were very unexpected or unfortunate purely because players aren't kind of physically / kind of mentally prepped for what's going to come next. Sure, they practiced it, but in match, it's a different situation. If you have, I expect hidden one. I'm sure everyone would agree that hidden one on paper is meant to be hidden aim, whether it be awkward aim or comfortable aim. It's aim consistency. When you say that a third of the map is a slow, as you said, 4 stars, that in my eyes could be an issue. And having those diff spikes pop in out of nowhere, on top of that, giving players who aren't as consistent free combo, that can lead to a few flaws. And I can understand
the little
the
things
issues there.
really make the difference. And it's thin margins, especially in a match like this. It was so competitive, and that's it's one thing to lose on these very small score differences in the first set. As iFlame was talking about earlier, like obviously it could have gone to SK and maybe HK got a little bit luckier, but I think it's not even remotely as upsetting as some of the stuff that happened in the reset. I think I think that should have gone better, but yeah.
Yeah, I think that kind of thing with having a very diff spiky pool really does favor the players with the high skill cap that can get through those diff spikes without too much difficulty. And of course, in that grand finals matchup, that was worst HR player. But even going back to the Hong Kong USA match, USA is the kind of more, I would say, well-rounded and consistent team, but they don't really have the skill cap to match MCY and Suwagi. And so I do think the pool really affected both Hong Kong and US in each of their matches. And while it is normal, obviously every week the pool is going to slightly favor one team or another depending on the picks. This week, that was maybe the case a little bit more than usual.
Yeah. Still though, brilliant tournament brilliant win to finish off. The top 3 teams that I think the majority of people expected were in. Super great matches, super close matchups, great outlying player performances. And that is a great way to end 3-digit World Cup. Of course, congrats to South Korea. And let me just say, I called it. I was right on the pick'ems. I knew SK were going to win.
Yeah.
Thank you. And feels good, man. It feels right, man. But yeah,
Credit where
huge
credit is due.
congrats. Huge
There you
congrats to
go.
South Korea. Congrats to
Shiba.
Hong Kong.
Yep.
And feels good, man. Yeah.
Yep. Shiba is the real winner of 3WC. But
True.
again, huge congratulations to
That's
South
so
Korea,
real.
Hong Kong, and the US. But that concludes 3WC. Now, we were all in agreement when we decided to pick a MVP for 3WC. And I think it'll come as a surprise to absolutely no one that we decided to go with worst HR player. He was just all tournament long. He was so consistent, put up massive scores when it mattered. He just really stepped up in this tournament. And it's not only 3WC, but he's just been stepping up in a lot of tournaments lately. Like you look back to OWC, where he really popped off and just brought South Korea to the second place placement that they made. And he's really the entire reason that they were able to do so well and win the entire tournament. I mean, if you don't have worst HR player, honestly, I'm not sure who you can replace him with. And I could see that very easily dropping South Korea from, a first place team to a top 6 team. Now, while we were all in agreement with that, there were definitely other players that came close and had really good performances. Do you guys have any thoughts on that?
I mean, yeah, I think the most obvious ones that were the closest to competing with Forum, although it's very clear that 2022 and 2023 in terms of tournaments is Forum's year. He's done so good. He's been so consistent and has proven how damn good he is, and kind of being the end of the spear for South Korea in this tournament. But other like super close contenders, I mean, obviously we have to talk about MCY4 and Suwagi. Obviously, I think that is those are the next 2 closest players that contributed the most to their teams. You've also got players like Krilla. You've also got quite a few players from the USA like Taquito and Taquito. I think those 2 players did really, really good this tournament. But yeah, if I was to like give like a top 3 in terms of the most performing players, of course, Forum gets number 1. But for me, MCY and Suwagi, I think those 2 were the next best players. They did so good. And but unfortunately, in that grand final situation, that's where the flaw comes in, where you can't rely on these 2 gods of tournaments. You just can't. But they're up here for a reason, man. They were so damn good, so damn consistent, and they carried Hong Kong almost the entire way through.
Yeah.
I mean, I agree fully. That's
Yeah. Honestly, I think Shiba covered it super well. I don't think there's anything else to add. Now, we also wanted to cover a few up-and-coming 3WC players. Before the episode, I had each person pick a player who maybe is not as well known as kind of your big top players like worst HR players, Suwagi, or MCY4, but who still played really well and who we were really impressed by in the tournament that honestly you could see having very, very bright futures in the tournament scene. To start off, I think we were going to start off with, was it Knots with Oh My God?
am I
No,
wait,
it's me.
what?
Or is
Yeah,
that's Titani.
that's-
All right,
I think
Titani,
we're
you're
getting
up
things a
then.
bit
We're
confused here.
spoiling it. We're spoiling it. Okay,
Yeah.
we're spoiling it. We're spoiling it. All right, let's
Yeah,
start. Let's start
Takani?
with Arj. Yeah, Takani.
Yeah.
All right.
Get your
The
pick.
player that definitely was not mentioned 15 seconds prior. I picked
Yeah.
Arj or Oh My God. Arj was kind of this Italian player throughout the tournament who honestly wasn't doing so good. We saw qualifiers, a very good performance from Arj, and then around the 16 quarterfinals, semifinals, we kind of see them fall off a little bit. They're playing every map for Italy, by the way. Literally, the only time they didn't play a map was qualifiers. But for the most part, they're just putting up supporting combos for the tournament. But what I found interesting was finals, where we really see Arj kind of come into their own for the first time, and I want to say kind of save Italy. in the finals round. As we see Kirochi putting up good scores, but Arj is actually outscoring her for the very first time. And helping Italy build up the scores that are absolutely needed within finals. I think Arj's performance is something that I'm really going to be looking at in the future as just a commentator, just watching to see how they do in future tournaments, because that 3WC finals and qualifiers are really promising.
Yep. Next, Knots. This time, we'll actually get your pick.
Yeah. Well, my pick is Amamir Kokoro. It's it's gotta be my boy. It's gotta be one of the people who carried me to a badge. It's I mean, I also think it's perfectly justified with just how good he has looked this tournament. Just been ridiculously good. Whenever I talk about SK getting better and better every time I see them, the one player that always comes to mind is Amamir Kokoro, as is really fitting that label perfectly. Every time I see him, he is better, and he's already a great player. Maybe 7 months ago or whenever it was, Konya Cup 3 Div 2 happened, he contributed quite a bit to that team's victory. But now it's come to the point where in the match against China, he has better match cost than the Chinese core of the Lolols and Crystal, which is just absurd. But it's like throughout the tournament, it's been really great performances. It's 700k plus on 6 out of 10 final team scores in qualifiers, which is every map he was part of the roster on. And, a little bit of a dip in performance in the round of 16. But from there on, the aforementioned China match where he gets 900k mean average on 6 out of 10 maps played, where 4 of those are points for South Korea. 600k average against HK in the next match, a little bit weaker of a match, but then he comes up back again against the US, where he is in for every map played and puts up a 600k average again, but on a much harder pool and third in match cost on the match above Taquito, which is, I don't know, there are some dips in performances. Some of this unevenness might be a bit of a struggle with nerves, as anyone who's watched a match he played can tell, but it could also just be a little bit of a lack of consistency, especially, perceived lack of consistency next to the caliber of player you see around him. It's, worst HR players right there. Not everyone can be for him, but impact player even on the late pools already, free mod 2, make or break, does actually pull it off in the bracket reset and makes the difference and wins it for them. It's just such an essential part of SK's success this year, and I think great things are ahead for South Korea in OWC, with him and Jong Woo-young especially. They have a great team, and the optimist says SK can win, the pessimist in me says the US will win every year for eternity, in perpetuity. The US are the champions, but maybe not actually. It's maybe I can actually believe in another team to win.
Okay, I'm going to go next. So if you have seen me cast the Germany matches, you would know that I think it's quite obvious who my favorite player in this tournament was. It's Karcher. I have been a big fan of Karcher because I absolutely love players who come out of, in my eyes, kind of out of nowhere and just completely stomp the tournament scene and just do so good consistently in kind of keeping a team ahead on a particular kind of skill set area. Karcher started his World Cup debut for Germany, if I remember correctly, at rank 140. And he was kind of known in his solo scores for very clearly being a strong mechanics player, very strong on the hard rock, very strong on the double time. It's clear in his scores. However, in 3WC, not only did he get a massive confidence boost in his own solo scores, but made such consistent scores, such consistent plays through and through in tournament for his team. He was the player, in my opinion, that made Germany a substantially more threatening mechanics roster. You've got Krilla, you've got Shark. Those two players are very well rounded, both very strong on almost everything. But Akaria made that team scary on speed, made that team scary on the double time, and made that team very, very scary on hard rock in particular. Akaria showed up for almost every mechanics heavy map played in for Germany, most particularly on the hard rock and the double times. He was one of those few players throughout this tournament where he was that guy that picked hard rock into the 3-3s. I think the most popular example, granted, Germany did lose, but it was a very close final map on that 3-3 in the finals where Akaria was the outlier in picking the hard rock. It was very close, and he remained consistent and put up a good score. He is that hard rock guy for Germany, and I am so excited to see him climb the leaderboard, to climb and improve and be that star mechanics player for Germany in OS World Cup. He was a lot of people were unsure. A lot of people were unsure of his ability in tournament. We hadn't seen him with tournament history for quite a while. We hadn't seen him play in previous tournaments for a little while. He hasn't got any badges as well. It's very hard to know what Akaria did beforehand. We only really got a reference of his solo scores, but this is the first time where Akaria has made a substantial name for himself as a brilliant mechanics player in the tournament scene. And not only is he going to, in my opinion, get picked up from some really good teams in open rank team tournaments, but he is going to be that very exciting mechanics factor for Germany, especially when you have players like White Cat coming in OWC, having that strong mechanics and hard rock player right next to you. They're going to be a dynamic duo if Akaria makes it in tryouts. He made a great first impression, and he made a great first impression in qualifiers as well. That was where we got to see him. He kicked off right off the bat in qualifiers, being very clearly a strong outlier for Germany, particularly in hard rock. Of course, double times in qualifiers are kind of notorious for having a lot more FCs and high scores. Hard rock, though, can be a bit of a different story. And Akaria just showed how comfortable he was and put up some brilliant scores and made Germany a very threatening hard rock team. And I could not be more excited for what he's going to do in the future. He's also really good on aim. He's just so flexible on these mechanics heavy maps. And I cannot wait to see what he's going to do. He's proved himself as a core mechanics member of the German team and remained consistent throughout the tournament, consistently doing really solid scorelines, really solid plays through and through. And I'm so excited to see what he's going to do. I feel like he is the biggest up-and-comer in the European tournament scene, and I'm super hyped for what he's going to do in the future, especially in OWC if he makes it in tryouts.
We've got one more player, and my pick for this tournament is going to be Karcher. She, along with Arj, was a huge part of the reason Italy was able to make it to the finals. I think overperforming where a lot of people expected them to place. She played, over the whole tournament, she played 84% of the maps for their team. So, I mean, not quite as many as Arj, but still in for so many and showed so much diversity across skill sets. And I mean, look at the quarterfinals where they went up against Team USA, and not to discount the performances of the rest of Italy in that match, but felt like Karcher nearly single-handedly brought them to a tiebreaker against the eventual third place American team that is obviously incredibly strong, instead losing 6-4, but they made it an incredibly close match, which I don't think anybody expected, largely thanks to Karcher. And I mean, you can also see in the graphic here, she looked so good, especially in the later stages of the tournament. Number 5, 18, and 10 individual, top scored, finals, hidden one. Just continued to get better and better throughout the tournament and show that she could compete with, the strong carries of the other teams. And she's really highlighted her kind of strength in her specific skill sets, which are the aim and alt focus picks. She almost feels like a mini Zoodinator in a way, just so good at the aim picks, so good at the alt picks. And when you actually look at the DT3s across the tournament, those DT alt maps, nobody performed better on DT alt than her throughout the entire tournament, aside from Kriller, who's obviously a very, very good player. And just really excited to see what she does next. I think if she can, shore up some of the more clear weaknesses, like the speed is really the only big one. She's pretty consistent everywhere else. Then she's going to be a terrifying player to go up against in any open rank tournament.
Yeah, I wanted to add to that. I feel like Italy definitely get the award for the most improved team and most unexpected
Yeah,
team to push really
absolutely.
hard in the
I
late
love
stages.
Italy.
And yeah, I love Italy. I mean, Karcher, Arj were the dynamic duo. You also had Shadow Monaco and you also had GG fill in as well. But it really was kind of that core trio of Karcher, Arj, Shadow Monaco, but especially Karcher and Arj. Those two players was so good, and I'm looking forward to what Italy are going to do in OWC. If they manage to get some higher skill cap players in the later stages of OWC, man, that's going to be great because Karochi is going to be able to play around such higher talent and is going to really boost up Italy's performances. Those quarterfinals to finals ratings are insane, insane, especially when you know the matchups that they had. Insane.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm sure Italy got a lot of new fans, and if Croce and Arch can both level up in time for OWC, I think they could definitely go far. But do you guys have anything else to add before we move on from 3WC entirely? All right. Well, that,
Zaglaw still yet to be disproven. That's it. There you go.
Just Zaglaw.
there you
Yeah.
go.
True.
Blame.
True. Shout out to the Jag Law.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. What can I say?
As a final 3WC note, don't forget to be angry at Taikani if you're a USA fan. And that is going to be the end of 3WC until
Sorry.
next year. So, yep. So for future episodes, we are going to only have Course Stays Closed to cover. And that is what we're going to be moving on to now. Why don't we start off with Zoodinator against MCY4? Ended up going to tiebreaker. It was such a close match. Honestly, could have gone either way, but MCY took it in the end. I mean, honestly, whoever wants to start us off with this one, go ahead.
This is okay. I'm gonna start this off. This is the ultimate rematch. Sorry, Takane.
I
I'm
see,
sorry, Takane.
Takane.
I'm so sorry.
Messed up.
It's,
Got
okay. It's
sniped.
okay. I'll talk about the storyline here, and I'll let you carry on with this. This is the ultimate rematch, the ultimate storyline. Both these players were facing off again in the round table. Of course, Zoodinator did manage to get invited, if I remember correctly, and she is going to be able to play again in the round table. But that round table duo. Both of these players being relatively similar in their skill set, both having a little bit more leaning edges in the hidden and the hard rock. But it was such a great match, such a great rivalry. And Zudi proved that in the interview that you mentioned yesterday, her improvement in her flexibility was brilliant. And it's great to see how close of a match it was. Of course, Zudi did take it, but it was a great match to watch. And I'm glad to see that Zudi managed to get her revenge. Takane, I'll let you talk now
All
because
right.
I know you wanted to talk.
So I was sick the weekend that this match happened, and I was brought on for emergency commentary. I believe the one of the commentators that was supposed to do it disappeared, and so I will say that this is the match that made me lose my voice entirely. The day I woke up after this, I could not speak at all, and honestly, worth it. This match, obviously, as you said, it went to a tiebreaker. It was a very close, very contested match between these two players. Constant back and forth, and Zoodinator was the first to reach match point for the first time. In the round table, she could only get 4 points against MCY4 in both the matches that they played. Both one on best of 13 and one best of 11. Kind of finally breaking those 4 points to get the match point, guarantee yourself a tiebreaker, and reach the tiebreaker. The tiebreaker, of course, was very good for Zoodinator. We have our wonderful little gameplay screen for those watching live, where you can kind of see just how comfortable she is on this, her accuracy and her combo. For some reason, MCY4 went hidden on the tiebreaker, something that I don't feel many people thought was a good idea. And he had a lot of comfort issues on the tiebreaker, something that would end up giving Zoodinator the match in the end with a pretty handy TV victory.
Yeah. Now I'm going to talk about the bans for a second. I feel like the No Mod 6 has just been the bane of Zoodinator's existence this tournament. She's banned it out in 3 out of 4 matches. And it really just limits you to one ban, and I feel like has been problematic throughout the tournament. But otherwise, the bans were really good from both players. I thought Zudi's DT ban was really good. Something that MCY FC'd in the round of 16, and is obviously very good on. MCY, I think, was kind of forced to ban out the Hard Rock 2 because it was a lot more aim focused this week than certain previous weeks. And Zoodinator is just so good at these, really just any aim focus pick. And so kind of forcing MCY's hand on that one. Now, I'm honestly not too sure what happened with the HD3 pick early on. It was, I think, a breakpoint on the first map of the match with a 250k score from Zudi, and I'm willing to bet that was just a super unlucky playthrough where it's something like bottom score of locals, and they do happen sometimes. What I was really impressed by is Zoodinator's recovery into the second half of the match. I mean, she dropped at one point 3 straight points, with 2 of those being break points, and I feel like that's so hard to recover from mentally. So, I mean, I was super impressed that she was able to, not let that get to her and just, get those points right back and keep the match super close. Otherwise, the picks were pretty standard until obviously we get to DT2. I think I was watching this match live and I saw the DT2 pick and I was like, there's no way. Like surely any other pick would make more sense than DT2. And then she proceeds to get basically an FC with 85% accuracy and win the pick. And that is like, I mean, yes, it is one thing to like mash your way through a map, but like it is actually insanely difficult to do that and actually get through the map without finding any big drops. It's almost harder to get that full combo with 85% accuracy than actually just being able to play the map and getting like, a high accuracy FC. It was like super out of nowhere. And then obviously Zoodinator just played really well in the tiebreaker. I do think MCY probably could have skipped out on the hidden in that TB, and almost definitely would have had a better chance. I feel like you almost never want to handshake any hidden on any pick against Zudi unless you have to. And so while it could have been closer, I think even MCY without the hidden, I would probably still favor Zudi on TB. But overall, it was just such a good match, super close. I think very well played and good picks from both players, and honestly, one of the most exciting matches of the weekend.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, going back to that DT2, man, both of these players, both Zoo and MCY, fought notorious for struggling on these tapping heavy maps. Both of them having kind of a distinct rivalry. Again, referencing back to the roundtable roundtable qualifiers, where both of these players had some really close matchups. But Zuri, I believe, both clutched out both of these maps. But Zudi has shown tremendous improvement. Despite struggling a little bit on the axe, she combo gamed the absolute hell out of this map. And it just goes to show that despite her not being able to maintain good accuracy, she can hold on to stamina much better. She's shown her improvements. She walked the walk, man. She said that she was looking for these big improvements, looking for these little weaknesses, and walked the walk, man, and got a great score on that DT2.
Yeah. Knots, did you have anything?
Oh yeah, I can. I mean, basically already explored this territory, but we can. I'll mention that MCY4 must have felt pretty ambushed, picking both Nomad 2 and Nomad 5 and losing both of them. The beginning of the match, just yeah, the whole Zudi tapping thing, 3 points. It's pretty insane. It's but yeah, well deserved, well deserved. Finally gets her vengeance.
Yeah. On to our next match. Honestly, another really close match that may have surprised a lot of people was Taquito versus Karcher, second round of losers bracket.
Who wants to go with this one? Who wants to start?
I can. I mean, I can start off. I went
There you
last
go,
just
go
now.
for it,
I'll.
Knots.
I mean, I only have a couple comments anyways. We get them out of the way. It's I mean, close map outside of the 2 speed picks in Nomad 5 DT2. But I expected a bit more out of Taquito on the tech pick. That was a bit yeah, I was very surprised to see Karcher beat him on it. Kind of uncharacteristic, but yeah, it's as much as Karcher has lost the lag spikes and is in better form than he was at the start of the tournament, having a pretty low seeding. I'm still not, I still am not seeing the OWC form Karcher, and I maybe I feel like Taquito maybe should have looked better this match. Not terribly impressed.
Fair enough. I mean, this match I thought was interesting because, I mean, to go back to the Zoodinator MCY match for a second, it feels like they had a lot of maps that they could, both play fairly comfortably and were both good on. Whereas when you look at Karcher versus Taquito, each of them have very clear advantages and maps they want to pick, which made the bans really easy. Obviously, Taquito has been probably the best player in the tournament on these, HD2s and the no mod 6s, and especially stepped up on the speed this time around. Whereas Karcher obviously wants to go for the no mod picks, for the aim heavy picks. And so picks and bans were very obvious for both players. Now, even despite that, Taquito did manage to get 4 points in a row. And again, that's tough to recover from mentally. So again, really impressed with Karcher's ability to bring it back and make it close. And overall, I thought both players played well enough. Taquito, like Not said, definitely could have played a little bit better, but I thought he did step up massively on speed. I think I've seen the No Mod 5 and the DT2, if I'm remembering correctly. So Karcher just didn't stand a chance there. And I was a little bit surprised at first by the HD1 pick for Taquito instead of the HD3. But then you actually look into it a little bit more, and Taquito's done his research. Karcher had just gotten 700,000 in his first match of the weekend on the pick, so I don't think there's any way Taquito picks that. And I mean, I think Karcher doesn't pick it either for very good reason. The 700K was an absolutely absurd score on this pick, and probably not something that you can repeat. But just the knowledge that Karcher has the ability to do something like that definitely scares Taquito off of the pick. And to be honest, I thought although the picks were mostly good, I was super baffled by the No Mod 5 pick from Karcher. And it was the second pick too. So, it wasn't like he was running out of options and just didn't know what to pick. It was a very early pick in the match when he still had so many things open, and just lost the pick as you would expect. I really didn't see where that was coming from, and I feel like if that Nomad 5 pick had instead been replaced with a hidden 3 pick at any point in the match, we probably see that end up going to tiebreaker, and it could have been a much closer match. So ultimately, I think just maybe a couple missed picks from Archer, but close match regardless.
I think the main theme with this match in general is that both of these players were genuinely pretty close, but both of these players did not put up as high scores as some of us expected on a few of these maps. But as you mentioned, iFlame, earlier, the pick of the No Mod 5 from Karcher is definitely questionable, not for the same reason. I think Karcher actually generally had a pretty decent performance on it, not only outshining Taquito in the accuracy department, but only really missing once, maybe one or two extra slider breaks as well. It was quite clear that Karcher was comfortable, but I'm not sure why you would pick speed into Taquito, especially when you're comfortable with it, knowing that Taquito on paper has the advantage of it. I feel like there are way more maps that you can lean into that you could prioritize. So that was a bit of a questionable pick for Karcher. I can totally agree on that. Not because Karcher isn't known for being super strong on speed, because Karcher clearly was relatively comfortable on this, only having one miss, and I'm assuming a slider break or two, because I don't think you would get 455k based off of one miss alone, especially with that accuracy. But generally, this was close. Of course, as Nortz mentioned, though, I think a few maps did have a little bit of an underperformance here from Taquito in general. But yeah, Taquito kind of sealing the deal with the 2 miss on the DT2. It wasn't an FC, but it was tremendous combo. And yeah, I think Karcher showed a little bit of comfort on the speed, but not comfortable enough to outshine Taquito, unfortunately. And that led to a Taquito victory, 6-4. Anything else people want to talk about? Takani, maybe?
No, you guys pretty much covered everything. It was a good 6-4 victory for Taquito. Very excited to see how he moves on through the finals round.
Yeah, honestly, I don't think I could have put it any better than Shiba. Obviously, it's not that Karcher is better than Mud 5, but it's something that is at very best contested, and even something that Taquito might want to pick. But with that, obviously, MCY and Karcher both now eliminated from the tournament. Taquito moving on to the next round. The last matchup I wanted to talk about was one that went, I think pretty much as everybody expected, but I do think it was maybe a little bit closer in score than most people expected, and that was Malachevsky versus Suwagi. I think Suwagi has looked great, but obviously against Malachevsky, who's just been the best of the best throughout the entire tournament, pretty much. I was really impressed that Suwagi was able to take 3 points off of Malachevsky and make a lot of the maps look very close, even though he might not have gotten the points. And I think the question, I guess I'll start with this one, but I feel like the question for a while now has been how do you beat Malachevsky? And it doesn't feel like anyone's really come up with an answer so far, but Suwagi is definitely getting there. It felt like Malachevsky is just a little bit too consistent. I think Suwagi had some clear advantages. You look at the three picks that he won, and they were solid victories. A lot of them were solidly decisive, and Suwagi was able to take points on his own picks. But it felt like at a certain point, gets it to 3-3, doesn't give up any breakpoints, and then he just kind of ran out of picks. Malachevsky is just too well rounded at the moment for most people to keep up with. But I think Suwagi has really shown that Malachevsky is beatable on the right pool. Just unfortunately for Suwagi, this was not the right pool. He was pretty speed gapped by Malachevsky, which forced both his bans. Whereas Malachevsky, again, being so well rounded, had the freedom to pretty much ban out whatever he wants, whatever he didn't feel comfortable on. I think we saw some really impressive scores from both sides. Malachevsky FC in DT3, which is a insanely hard map, was crazy. But obviously Suwagi looked incredible on the aim, which is the points he got off of Malachevsky. I expect he'll continue to look at on the aim picks throughout the tournament. And really the last thing is Suwagi did give up the 2 break points at the end to drop the match, which was the Nomad 3 and the Hard Rock 2. But even though I didn't work out, I wouldn't fault Suwagi at all. I thought they were actually really good picks because outside of the Nomad 3 and the Hard Rock 2, didn't really feel like he had any other good options. The other 2 things that were open were the Nomad 4, which obviously you really don't want to pick tech into Malachevsky. That very rarely goes well. And then the Hidden 3 was super aim control heavy, which you also don't really want to pick into Malachevsky. So just ran out of options. But regardless, I was very impressed by his performance, and I think he's going to be absolutely terrifying in the losers bracket.
Anybody else want to say anything before I start? Or
I could come in and just agree that wait, I'm looking at the wrong notes. Second. Okay, there we go. The final HR, I think easily putting on Suwagi's way. Wasn't that like a 1,000 score difference or something? It's
two
Pretty
and a
sure.
half thousand, I believe.
Yeah.
Just
I
close.
think that the match could have potentially even gone longer, a little bit longer. Maybe could have even gotten another point. It's a really, really impressive match. It's a great match. The hidden 2-point was valid, but the other 2 points that Suwagi got, I thought were especially impressive because it was just Suwagi performing up to Malachevsky's standard on those maps.
Mhm.
So It's a really good match. Great match.
Yeah, the scoreline does not reflect how close this match was. Out of the 12 maps that was played, 5 of them were about under 50,000 in difference. Some really, really close maps here, and some very tight, unfortunate situations for Suwagi to choke on. Obviously, the Hard Rock 2 is probably the biggest unfortunate situation there for Suwagi, losing by, as mentioned before, 2,500 could have made the scoreline much closer. But Suwagi kept up, man. I really think that the only issue that Suwagi had in this match was that Malachevsky was simply too flexible. All of the maps that Suwagi on paper was good on, he played really well on. And this is a good thing to see. This is good. This is a positive because we're finally starting to see players who are able to keep up with Ristol on multiple skill sets. Not all of them. Nobody has got the level of flexibility as Malachevsky just yet. However, we are seeing players start to keep up with more skill sets than before. Previously Malachevsky was just absolutely stomping on everything. The problem is he's just so damn good on so damn many things. And Suwagi can't play everything. And granted, you can't really blame him. You don't really have that many players who are that flexible and well-rounded. But on the maps that he did well on, the No Mod 1, the Hard Rock, was it the Hard Rock 1? Which one was that one? The Blue Archive 1. That was the number 1. Sorry. The number 1, the double time 1, multiple aim heavy picks that, yes, Ristol on paper is really good on. Sorry, I had a brain blunder there for a second. But yeah, the maps that on paper Suwagi was really good on, he kept up, man. He did really, really good.
Yeah.
He either won them or lost by just barely. Like barely any maps. The normal 2 was really hotly contested, just under 50k. That was another close map that I think should be mentioned here.
Yeah. China, do you have anything to add before we move on?
Yeah, of course, Malachevsky is absolutely the best player in the world. I don't think there's even any room for argument as we've seen over this past year. But I don't think Malachevsky's unbeatable. Suwagi kind of proving that Suwagi putting up a fight, that's kind of worth celebrating for a lot of these players who are looking at Malachevsky and getting terrified, feeling that they're unable to beat him. Malachevsky is absolutely beatable. Malachevsky isn't guaranteed a Corsairs closed win, and I think there's 2 to 3 players still in this tournament who absolutely have what it takes to beat Malachevsky, and Suwagi is included in that.
Yeah,
Gods
and
can bleed. Gods
they
can bleed.
can.
Gods
And
can bleed.
thank goodness. I mean, I think Malachevsky is obviously still the favorite to take the tournament, but it makes it so much more exciting when there is, at the very least, a chance, and there are, at the very least, players that can compete. It's never any fun when there's one team or one player that just is a guaranteed win every time. OWC, please give us a new winner someday.
Exactly.
But I think that's going to be it for this round. We are going to move on very quickly to the predictions, and we are going to start off with one that I could see being very close: Suwagi versus Taquito. And we're just going to start from left to right. This time we're going to start with Takani. Go ahead.
Yeah, this one absolutely has a pretty good chance to be contested. What you're going to see a lot of is Suwagi just sort of highlighting that aim. Taquito is going to go for more of a hidden tech angle as always. So it's really going to come down to what isn't aim, what isn't tech. How is that contested? Obviously, Taquito is going to win on stamina. Suwagi's probably going to win on precision. I'm honestly not sure on reading. Probably Suwagi favored, but Taquito could take it should he try. As you said, it's going to be contested. If any match goes to a tiebreaker this weekend, this is a pretty good shot at one.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm actually. Oh yeah, you can give your prediction or your scoreline.
Oh, you're right. Scoreline. My scoreline was 7-4. Suwagi favored. I think Suwagi just edges Taquito out a little bit. I think we're probably going to see a breakpoint on tech at some point, which is going to be very, very match defining. Personally.
Yeah. All right. I guess I will follow that up, and I'm going to agree with your assessment. I'm going to go 7-5 Suwagi. So I do feel like it's going to be a little bit closer. And it's interesting because we did talk about previously that Suwagi looked amazing in the last round, whereas we felt Taquito could have had a couple better scores, but did really show up on the speed. And the reason I think it is going to be as close as it is because the skill sets are just so different. And so I think Swaggy is going to be forced to ban out either rating or speed. Um, Obviously, there's 4 picks between the rating and the speed. So that's going to be, I mean, 2 free points for Taquito right there. Otherwise, there's going to be 2 other DT picks, right? Because we are expanding the pool to have 4 maps of each mod category. And so I do think Taquito should be favored on the DT generally. But once you run into the speed rating and DT picks, I can see Taquito maybe getting another point on something like the tech pick, which should be pretty contested. But after that, I feel like Taquito is just going to run out of picks, and so it will be a win for Suwagi. Shiva, you're up next.
I feel like this is a little bit more one-sided for Suwagi. I think Taquito, despite having a good performance in these later stages of the tournament, I feel like Suwagi's performance against Malachevsky has proven his versatility in particular, despite clearly being one of the kings in aim in general in this tournament. I feel like he's got much more room to flex against Taquito. I think Taquito as well, not only being good on the hard rock, but really good on the tech. The thing is, Suwagi can fight back on that tech and I think the only skill set that Taquito kind of surefire has against Suwagi is the hidden and the speed. Aside from that, I think Suwagi outshines a lot more. Suwagi is going to absolutely hard abuse the hard rock pool if Taquito doesn't ban 2 of them in the pool there. I think it's going to be a little more one-sided for Suwagi. I think Suwagi is going to take it 7-3. Not to say that Taquito is going to underperform. I feel like Suwagi's had just a brilliant stroke of improvement. Same to Taquito, but before the stroke of improvements, I would have said the same thing. I still think Suwagi is going to take it 7-3.
Well, will we all be in agreement, or maybe we'll have
I
a
mean,
switch up?
I literally, when you said 7-4, 7-5, that's literally what I have. I have Suwagi 7-4, 7-5. I couldn't decide between one of them, but that is the scoreline I expect. Competitive, but ultimately it's Suwagi win. I just think, especially the same consistency on Suwagi is so huge, and I think that in spite of Keto being favored on tapping, it's and maybe making for some free points in air quotes for Taquito. I don't. Even if Suwagi doesn't have an equivalent of that, I just think that aim consistency really favors him overall, and it's possible to see a Taquito win potentially. I just think it's unlikely. I think Suwagi is just too good.
Yeah, I think we are all in agreement then. And with that, we can move on to Kriller versus Enri. 2 players that have looked so good throughout most of the tournament, obviously. Kriller coming off a disappointing loss against Emrek just last week, but obviously Emrek is just so good, and so you can't fault Kriller too much for that. I think we're going to have Shiba start us off this time.
Okay, so both of these guys have had very, very kind of close skill sets, except for a few. Both of these guys are great on the hidden. Both of these guys are great on the tech. Both of these guys are great on the ult and the kind of the awkward aim. But Enri edges it out on the speed, edges it out on the double time, edges it out on more mechanics heavy maps. I think Kriller is going to put up a absolutely brilliant fight. And I hope it's a close match because my prediction is that Enri is going to take it 7-6. I feel like without the big spurt of improvement we've seen Enri have, this last week, Enri went on a tear, demolishing 2 incredibly strong players in the tournament scene in a very dominant fashion, more dominant than I'm sure quite a few of us expected. And I think this improvement from Enri is going to show in this next match against someone like Kriller, who I think a lot of people would consider a great rival, especially when the skill sets and the domineering all-round carry performances for their respective nations are going to kind of be mentioned and considered here. But I think Enri takes it out purely because of the fact that he wins solely on those mechanics. He really hotly contests Kriller on many skill sets, on the aim, on the hard work, on the as I already mentioned, both these guys great on tech, both these guys great on hidden and alt. But it's the mechanics that I think Enri's going to outshine on, and I think Enri's going to take it 7-6. I think it's going to be really close, but I think Enri's going to edge it out.
All right, Knots.
I mean, I guess I'll meddle with things and just stroke Enri's ego a bit and say that based on the scores, all of Enri's scores were just better than Kriller's on every single map they both played. So 7-0 Enri. It's I don't know, like I honestly feel like
bold prediction.
it's kind of ridiculous how good Enri was last weekend, and if we can truly expect that next time, I don't think Kriller can win. Like, if we're looking at that level of performance, it's not possible. It's a real prediction would honestly be more like 7-3, which I don't think is unreasonable. I think Enri's pretty heavily favored. A lot of maps to play, it's a longer match, BO13. So I imagine that Kriller will be able to put up some stuff on some of the maps, take some points, but I don't know. You can call it recency bias or whatever. I think Enri crushes, actually.
Wow. Gutsy prediction. I respect
Big
that.
prediction.
I wouldn't call it recency bias at all. This is the Enri that I've been waiting to see for a long time. This is the Enri that I know forever. He's had that dog in him. And finally seeing him sort of come out into his own this past weekend, I think this is the Enri that was invited to Corsairs Close for a reason. I would have to agree with your quote realer prediction of 7-3. I think Enri just absolutely edges out Kriller, especially on this difficulty. Kriller's going to start to really get skill capped. You're seeing, his stats are kind of going down already, and I think that's going to continue into the finals weekend. I don't think Enri is the same way. I think Enri will keep pushing on. I wouldn't be so daring as to say a 7-0. Kriller is obviously a very, very good player, and this still has a chance to be a contested match. But I do think Enri has what it takes to still almost demolish Kriller.
Well, honestly,
yeah.
Go ahead, Shiba.
No. Go. I'll let you do your pred first before I say. Yeah.
Sounds good. I was gonna say I honestly thought we were going to have a lot more disagreement on this matchup, but it seems we're all pretty similar. My prediction was 7-2 for Enri, and it basically goes back to what Not said. On paper, I feel like the matchup is, in theory, pretty even. But then you go back and you actually look at the scores from last week. They had a lot of maps in common, and Enri had the better score 6 out of 6 times. If you account for the fact that Enri played some of those maps twice, then he had the better score 8 out of 8 times. He just was so far ahead of Kriller in that last weekend's pool that I honestly don't think it's going to be particularly close. I do think Kriller underperformed a little bit, and I expect he will play better. But Enri just kind of came out of nowhere this last weekend and absolutely popped off. You look at the start of this tournament, losing, I think it was 6-3 to Ciccone. A disappointing loss, but close in seed. It wasn't super unexpected. 6-0 against Crystal, who was a much lower seed, so not super unexpected there either. And then comes up against two of the best tournament players in the world in Whitecat and Zoodinator, and just destroys them both 6-2 both times. Honestly, not something I ever would have predicted before the weekend. And let's talk about the Zoodinator match for a second. He essentially had 4 FCs against Zoodinator: the Nomad 5, the GT2. Just look great on the speed pick. Somehow the Nomad 2, which should not be FCable. And then just missing the very end of Nomad 1. And that's 4 FCs on an 8-star pool, which is more FCs than Malachevsky had on the pool, which is saying something. And to be honest, you have to feel so bad for Zoody. Like, I don't know what Zoodinator did to piss off Henry. Maybe she pissed in his cereal before the match. but she did not deserve that kind of beating. She played really well too. She had strong scores, and she looked good. It just there's not much you can do against 4FCs, and I honestly think like against certain other opponents, Zoodinator could easily be in the top 6. Just as it turns out, maybe got kind of unlucky with the matchup there, and so yeah, I don't think it's going to be super close, and I as well I'm going to have to go Enri 7-2. Now, Shiva, I think you had something to add?
Yeah, so I wanted to interject a little bit and kind of point one thing out. I think both of these guys are really, really strong. I'm not downplaying anyone here. Enri has been on an absolute rampage. He's been doing so good against players like Zudin and Whitecat, arguably two of the strongest players, two incredibly strong players, two of the best players we could see. But I feel like Krilla's being a bit downplayed here. Yes, he did underperform a little bit against Emrek, but I have hope. I believe in the Krilla method. There's no Krilla. You know what I mean? I believe in Krilla. I think Krilla has an opportunity to come back. Multiple of their skill sets, as I've already mentioned, are very hotly contested. So despite me seeing Enri being victorious purely based off the fact that he edges out on the speed, I feel like Krilla can put up a brilliant fight on everything else. Everything else. I think despite that small minor underperformance, I think he's going to come back. I honestly just think he had a bad day. I know Krilla can do so much better. And I think that despite them having such 20 skill sets, I won't lie to you, I can see a world where Enri just completely wipes the floor with Krilla. I also see a world where Krilla edges out multiple maps in a row, just barely against Enri. I see that possibility. I see the chance. I still think Enri's going to take it, but I feel like this is going to be much closer than people think. I'm hoping for Krilla to make it a good fight because on paper, this matchup is amazing and super hype. I'm definitely going to be staying up to watch this match because this is one that I'm very excited to watch particularly. But I think Krilla's going to make this a lot closer. I feel like he's going to edge out on a few maps. But I think Enri, just purely based on the fact that he's got more skill sets to play around, is going to take the win. But I think it's going to be a lot closer than people think.
Yeah,
I think it's good of you to say that. It tempers the ego stroking from earlier, and I think potentially even increases the chances of Enri winning. I don't know. It's good.
Yeah, and I did kind of want to add on to that. I mean, despite me predicting the 7-2, I do think Kriller is going to perform a lot better than we saw last weekend. Obviously, we know Kriller is such a good player and can put up some much better scores. And to me, the big question is, can Enri match the performance from last weekend? I think if we see a similar performance level from Enri, I do think Enri is just going to edge out Kriller on most of the picks, especially because their skill sets are super comparable. So Kriller doesn't really have any super free picks over Enri, and the same is true the other way around. And that's kind of what I'm basing my prediction off of. But that is obviously a big if, right? It is one thing to have, like pop off and have an insane performance on one weekend of a tournament. It's another thing to be able to keep up that same insane level of performance in the next matches and for the rest of the tournament. So, I think if he can hold up that kind of same level we saw last week, that's when we see the 7-2. But it is also very possible we see a slightly worse performance because it is insanely hard to pop off like that every single week, in which case I expect a very, very close match between the two. But we'll have to see how it goes. It's going to be a good one either way.
Yeah,
Now,
seeing Enri keep up like this like Malachevsky levels of consistency.
mhm.
It's hopeful, and if he keeps it up, it's going to be great. But there's always a chance that maybe a minor fall off on a few maps here and there will give Kriller a few points as well.
Yeah, and that's exactly the fun thing. If I think you would put these two against each other, Malachevsky and Enri, in that last match, it honestly really could have gone either way. And question is, can Enri match the consistency of Malachevsky? Remains to be seen. But that brings us to our hypothetical matchup. So we all predicted Suwagi and Enri. So we are going to be taking a look at the Enri versus Suwagi round 2 matchup. Now, for this one, I think Suwagi has also looked incredible. And I think this one is going to be much closer. And for me, I think I would give this one to Enri maybe 7-6. Although I think it'll be close either way. And again, for me, this one's going to be a really big if on if Henry can keep up the performance level from last week. But if that's the case, I think he should be slightly favored against Suwagi. I think Suwagi is going to look very, very good on these aim picks and should have the advantage. But a kind of a clear point of weakness for me is the reading and speed picks, which are going to be a very massive disadvantage for Suwagi. Whereas, you look at tech, you look at, aim control. I mean, I think tech should be pretty comparable. Suwagi maybe has a slight edge on the aim control and a little bit of bigger edge on the aim map. But for the most part, I think as tournaments are pooled now, being really good at the game is not as, I guess, useful as being good at the speed and the rating, because it does tend to be a lot more picks that are kind of, up there. Like you have your hidden tech pick, you've got your hard rock tech pick, then you've got 2 reading picks and 2 speed picks, and you've got 4 DT maps. So usually at least another one of those DT maps are going to be pretty speedy as well. And so honestly, I think, all that said, I think both players are very comparable in terms of skill level. I think just the way that things are pooled is going to favor Enri just a little bit. And so I'm going to say 7-6, and I will throw it to Shiba for the next prediction.
I very much agree with your scoreline of 7-6. I think, if you want me to be honest with you, I think it's going to be 7-6. I am a little unsure of who will be that 7-6 player. I think the big question here is Henry going to continue that momentum? And assuming he does, I think he will take Suwagi down. But let's not downplay Suwagi here. I feel like it's going to be 7-6. I think it's going to be very close. But I think the difference here is that it's not necessarily a matter of having conflicting skill sets. It's more that it's going to be very back and forth, and the flexibility on skill sets that both these players may struggle a little bit more on is going to be the key factor here. Suwagi edges out on aim, hard rock, precision, and more kind of aim control heavy stuff. For Enri, he wins on tech, hidden, reading, and speed. Both of these guys have their core strengths, but not many core conflictions. So that's why, although I think this is going to be extremely close, I'm not entirely sure who I think will take this. But I think if I had to make a choice, if Enri keeps on this unbelievable killing spree he's on at the moment, I think he will edge out against Suwagi. Granted, it will be extremely close. I think Enri will take it 7-6.
All right, that's 2 7-6s so far. Let's go to Knots next.
Okay, I'll go Suwagi 7-6, but
There
I'll
we
say
go.
that I'll say that if Henry actually maintains the consistency and standard of play we saw last weekend, he not only has a chance, but I would even go as far as to say will win. I think it's just the question of whether or not that's possible. Of course, I'm not expecting him to I don't know, maybe I should expect him to put 4 FCs up again. I don't know, but I don't know if I can
don't know
expect
about
the
that
same level on this pool, but I'm more talking about whatever the equivalent performance would end up being, a 700k or whatever the hell. It's but if we see that level, I actually do think he just wins. But betting on it to have been at least sort of an overperformance or something, hedging against, recency bias, kind of mentioned before, but I'm very excited for this match, and I would even say I'm rooting for Henry. So yeah.
All right, we've got one more prediction to go for this match.
Wait, it's Connie. Yeah, it's Connie. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, and we'll make it 4 7-6s.
Okay.
I was kind of discussing with
Consistency.
Enri yesterday just what this weekend's gonna look like, and I made a comment that I don't believe there are gonna be too many TB matches, if any, in this tournament. from now on. And if any match in the rest of this tournament is going to go to a tiebreaker, I think it is going to be this one. And you guys have already kind of covered what the actual main game looks like. But I do think the tiebreaker ever so slightly favors Enri. I think the second half of the tiebreaker is just a little too tough for Suwagi. It doesn't really match what he's good at, and I think that's going to give it over to Enri in the end. So I would favor that 7-6 towards Enri. Of course, they will be very contested all throughout. I don't think there's a very clear victor, but in my opinion, it's just based off of the idea that this match would go to a tiebreaker. I think that Enri just wins.
Yep. Now, we've got the recency bias strong with this podcast. So I will say, because, we do our best to remain unbiased, have to balance Knots out a little bit. I will cheer for Suwagi despite my prediction. Now, we have saved, of course, the best for last. This is going to be the matchup I think everybody has been wanting to see. Two of the best players in the world, such high skill caps, such good consistency and tournament performance. And Malachevsky versus Emmerich, the 1 and 2 seeds. Why don't we get Taquito went last time, so he can start us off this time.
I want to say that this would be a close contested match, but I don't actually think so. I would give it 7-3 to Malachevsky. Obviously, Malachevsky's been looking so good in this tournament. He's just been doing a little bit better than Emmerich. Emmerich obviously doing very well, but I'm worried as we get into these later stage pools how he's going to do on his less prominent skill sets. I feel like Malachevsky can easy take precision and reading. I think it's just a little bit more favored on the tech. Speed's contested. It's something where I don't feel very hopeful for Emmerich personally. I'd love to see a close match, but I think this is just kind of Malachevsky's matchup.
All right. And sorry, what was the score line there?
7-3 Malachevsky.
7-3, right. All right. We will go for Shiba next then. Why not?
Okay, so I am going to disagree a little bit to Kani here. I'm not going to say that Emmerich will take it. I still believe that Malachevsky will get the victory. But I feel like the big TLDR with Emmerich in this tournament in general is that the longer he stays, the stronger he gets. He is far and away the player with the most dangerous and threatening skill cap ever. He is the number one player in the world. He is that player who sets scores no one could imagine. And of course, despite tournament being a little bit more of a different setting, I feel like he's got much more chances to edge out on other maps, considering that, of course, this is much higher star rating. This map pool edges are just around the 8-star level, and that's where Emmerich's skill cap can really come into effect. We could see a lot more close picks here for multiple maps. Of course, Malachevsky is Malachevsky. He's that guy, man. He's so consistent, so good on many skill sets. But I don't think it's a matter of Malachevsky getting out skill capped. I feel like it's more a matter of Emmerich being able to keep up on much more maps. The longer it goes, the better it gets for Emmerich. And that's why I think it's going to be extremely close. This is the matchup that we always wanted to see. The best tournament player in the world against the best solo player in the world and one of the best tournament players in the world. This is super exciting. Probably far and away the most anticipated tournament matchup we have seen for a very long time. And I am very hyped to see it. I do think, though, Malachevsky will take it off of consistency and will take Emmerich down 7-5. But that's not to downplay Emmerich's efforts. I think he's going to pull up a great performance, and I'm excited to see what he can do. He can edge out on many maps. Of course, the pool is extended as well. We've got a No Mod 6 now. We've got a Double Time 4 now, and a Hard Rock 4 and a Hidden 4. We've got more maps to play around. So I'm expecting to see Emmerich have the possibility of benefiting more of that double time, benefiting more of the hard rock, and having a lot of no mod maps that he can benefit with. No mod 5, no mod 1, those two maps in particular, I'm expecting Emmerich to win on. There are lots of options here for Emmerich, a lot more than I think some people think. And that's why I think it's going to get close. Final prediction, Malachevsky will take it 7-5.
There you go. So 2 predictions for Malachevsky that far, and I will give my prediction last, so I will toss this one to Knots.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna have to agree with Sheeb on this one. I'm gonna say Malachevsky 7-5. I basically, uh, the big thing for Emrek here is how much time you put into the pool. I think everything changes entirely depending on that, because as she was talking about, the higher skill cap pool, it's as much as he's not maybe as versatile as flexible as Malachevsky, Emrek can do anything he puts his mind to, it seems like, in Osu. So I I believe in it. But it's possible. I still think that it's hard to imagine Emmerich putting that much effort in. I'm not sure about that. I don't have insider info, right? But yeah, I'm gonna say Malachevsky, and someone who isn't Vaxay to beat Emmerich. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna have to agree. I'm gonna have to go. I think I'll go 7-4 Malachevsky. And it's pretty much just what you all have already said. It just comes down to consistency versus skill cap. And so, if you're looking at something like a grand finals pool, I think it would be. I could honestly see it going either way. But we've still seen Malachevsky put up a ton of incredible scores last weekend. And again, when you compare the scores of those two players, Malachevsky had the advantage 4-1 in terms of comparable maps. And so, as hard as the pools are starting to get, I think the reason Malachevsky is so good is that it's one thing to be consistent, but Malachevsky has that same consistency up to such a high star rating. And so, yes, it's finals, but I don't think the skill cap is a big enough issue for Malachevsky that we won't see that exact same consistency come out. So, well, I think we're going to see a closer matchup if they meet in grand finals. I do think this time around going to be 7-4 in favor of Malachevsky. Did anyone else have anything to add there?
No, I'm good. At least.
All
yeah,
right.
I've said my piece. Yeah.
In that case, well, lots of agreement on the podcast today. Always a shame, but often how it goes. Now, the part of Full Circle I'm sure you've all been waiting for. We are joined by Enri, so massive thank you to Enri for taking the time to join us today. Was supposed to join us last week, but I got sick before the episode, so that's on me. But brought him back this time around. Enri, how are you doing today, bud?
Good morning. It is 3 a.m. Hi, I am Enri. As people know, I'm playing in Corsairs Closed. A few months ago, I went open, and that was pretty good. That brought my momentum up. Not much I can say.
There you go. So if Enri loses his match tomorrow for whatever reason, you can blame us for making him stay up until 3 a.m. to do this interview. But
Peak hours, don't worry.
let's forget about this now upcoming match. Let's talk about last weekend for a second. You got two huge wins against some of the best tournament players in the game, White
Yep.
Cat and Zoodinator, beating them both 6-2. Talk to me about your strategy going into those matches, and how does winning a big match like that against players that you know are so good, what does that do for your confidence in the rest of the tournament?
Okay. So for both matches, as all people know, I go for the gimmick, the tech, the speed, just because I feel way more confident in those. Whether or not the players are good at it. But for my bans, I kind of went somewhat of an alternate route. Usually I go for the 2 Hard Rocks I'm worst at, but now I just ban Hard Rock 1. And my second ban was for White Cat, Nomad 1, and Zudi Hidden 1, because it was both of their specialties respectively. And yeah, I did feel a bit of ease during my match versus White Cat, because Tyke and we were talking about this. White Cat, although he's very good, I know him for being the non-practicer of tournaments in general, unless it's open or perennial. But overall, I just wanted to perform well and get top scores in the stage.
Yeah. Certainly did. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. For winning against tough opponents, that did a lot to my mental. I feel much more confident, especially when I know that Zudi played well. Her and I have so much mutual respect for each other, and even though it doesn't seem like it through the scoreline, I felt like the match was way closer than people think.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to kind of corroborate that and highlight that Zudi actually did play incredibly well in that match and would have beaten so many other players had she gone up against anyone else. But Enri just had an absolutely absurd pop-off performance. Now, you have another match coming up this weekend, this time, of course, against Suwagi. Well, what am I? I'm throwing. You got to play Curler first, and then potentially Suwagi, assuming you both win your matches. Now, everyone practices differently. For me specifically, if I play a map more than like twice, I get super mind block it and just choke in the tournament. So, talk to me about what practice looks like for you. You just grind out the maps as much as you can, or do you worry about mind block as well?
Throughout the course of Close, that changed a lot. Usually I'd go for just passes, but after that didn't go well with the Chiconia, I decided to just make a spreadsheet full of my scores. And I would always go for locals with scores depending on like the pool stage. So for quarterfinals, I aim for above 800k, and semifinals 650k, just to gauge how like familiar I was with the maps, as well as my bands. Along with that, I also look at my opponent's matches, see if there's anything that stands out to me. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that prep is definitely massive with not only bands but the picks, and I think a lot of people honestly underestimate how much prepping well for your opponent plays a role in these matches. But let's step away from Corsace for a second. This is, I think, your third solo tournament in the last year. I'm not sure if you've how many solo tournaments you've played before this, but um,
hmm
having you previously played in perfect math class round table 2, so how does playing in a solo versus team tournament change your mentality, and do you find one is more nerve-wracking than the other?
Originally, I was very certain that team tournaments were like my thing, but considering how I've been playing and how my mental is right now, excluding the Chicone match, obviously, I feel like I have so much more confidence in myself, and I don't think the format makes a really big difference. But for nerves in general, I'm pretty bad at handling them, but it eases itself the more I progress through stages. Unless, for example, like during course A's, in the tiebreaker, I had like really bad chest pains, and I had to stop playing my matches for like a day. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, do you find like you're more nervous if you're playing for a team or by yourself generally, or is it pretty comparable?
Uh, it's about the same now. I'd say in teams I have less nerves just because I'm with like I have the confidence that my teammates will do very good.
That's fair. Yeah, it helps when you have teammates to support you. I also know you have been spending a lot more time, and you've gotten a lot more serious about mapping over the past year and a half.
hmm
How has that kind of factored into your tournament play, and has it given you more of an appreciation for things like custom maps and pooling?
Oh, definitely. I need to name a few examples. The semifinals and quarterfinals DT3 were mapped by Scub and Ralkinson, and they actually have been like some of the few first people to influence me with most of the mapping fundamentals that I know now. And if I combine that with my own intuition as a player, I definitely appreciate more a lot of the mapper's decisions in custom mapping. Like specifically No Mod 2 this stage was very good. I feel like the approach of more aim control oriented No Mod 2 should be experimented with more. But it can also I feel like it can go the opposite way. For
Mm,
example, the finals No Mod 4, it's not really my thing. The density, the whole style is just something I can't really bring myself to appreciate.
yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. Obviously, no map is going to be for everybody, but
Yep.
a huge shout out, of course, to all of the Corsair's custom mappers who've been putting a lot of work into those custom maps. Now, we're going to get you to do some predictions, and we're going to start off with the big match, Malachevsky versus Emrek. Let's hear it.
Okay, I'd say that goes 7-6 in favor of Malice, just based on how they had a recent 1v1 during, like, I think like it was like a week ago, and
Yeah,
they
they
played it on
did
the open pool,
the
and I think it
yeah.
went to tiebreaker, yeah? Correct me if I'm
Uh,
wrong.
I think
Honestly,
it did.
could not
Yeah.
tell
It
you.
did.
You
I'm
might
pretty
be right,
sure.
though.
I'm pretty sure Emmerich. Of course, sometimes you don't have to. You can't reflect them, but it was. I think
Yeah.
it was like an early blunder for Emmerich, and then he came back to TB.
Yeah. I think Emmerich can definitely bring it back, if not win the tiebreaker on like a very good day. But I'd still give Malice the slight edge just because of his consistency.
All right, so thinking that one's going to be a little bit closer than most of us. Next, we've got Taquito Suwagi.
Okay, so I mean, people know how much I love Taquito as a player. I look up to him so much, and I'm really sorry, but I feel like it goes 7-4 in favor of Suwagi just because of how much his skill caps improved over the course of the tournament. Yeah.
There you go. Somebody clip it and send it to Taquito. We'll get some
No.
Corsair's trauma going. No, I'm kidding. But well, there is one more match to go. You know, I
Mhm.
couldn't let you get out of here without making you predict
Aw.
your own match. So you against Kriller. Give us a scoreline.
Okay. I would say I have 3 predictions. It can
Okay,
either go.
three predictions. Go
I'm
ahead.
thinking 7-4, 7-5, or tiebreaker, and I
Okay.
say I win just because I have a slight edge in the pool skill cap. I definitely want to abuse more of the speed, and I've recently picked up like aim, so I plan to do that as well. But it's so hard to predict all of these matches. Everybody is so good.
Yeah, just how it goes in a tournament like Corsair's Close, where you have 16 of the best players in the world, and they're all obviously so good. Anyone can
Yep.
win a match on any given day, depending on how they're feeling. But that is going to be all for the predictions. Again, Henry, huge thank you for staying up late and joining us today.
No problem.
Henry's socials should be on the screen. Go give him a follow at all of those. Was there anything you wanted to say to the viewers before we ended this episode?
Okay, so I feel like for those, I kind of wrote a whole script for this, but for those who would like really want to excel at anything, for me at least, it helped in tournaments. Do not let what anyone says get in the way of your improvement, because you don't have full. I mean, not only do you have full control of what you can learn, but you know about yourself more than every single spectator. And as someone who is really doubted early on, I I decided to like transfer that into self improvement rather than taking it as like, oh, it's over. This guy thinks bad of me. Blah blah blah. And I feel like people should really do that more. And
Yeah,
I would also like to say that it's pretty overwhelming, but the recent support from Corsairs is really, it means so much to me. I don't think I would have gotten this far, especially since 1v1s really aren't my thing. And compared to players like Malice and Judy, I feel like I haven't been playing for much, but I still have pretty good performances. So yeah, thank you, Fluffy.
absolutely. Yeah, I think that's super well said. I mean, you know, if for all the players, I know we do get a fair amount of Corsair's players that do watch the show, that we do end up talking about. Obviously, keep in mind that, like, you know, all of us are aware that when we say one player is not as good on a certain skill set, obviously that's compared to the other best players in the world on that skill set.
Mhm.
So is absolutely not something to feel bad about. And like Emery said, a huge thank you for all your guys' support. Continue to support all the players in Course. And I think that is going to be it for us. If you want to keep up with Course, follow our Twitch channel. Next match is going to be Enri versus Kriller, 14 UTC tomorrow. So stay tuned and make sure you wake up for that. I have been iFlame, of course, joined by Sad Shiba, Knots, and Kenny. And we will be back next week for Course's Close Analysis. Thank you guys all for watching, and you take care.
Bye.
See ya.
Goodbye.
Bye.